This is not the most wonderful time of the year when thousands of people dressed in festive gear hit the streets for the annual SantaCon pub crawl.
Or as the NYPD calls it, the nightmare before Christmas.
14 people were arrested. 2 were busted for assaulting police officers. Locals say they want the event shut out altogether.
Puking on the street, peeing on the street, committing sex acts everywhere.
I'm not leaving my apartment today.
The annual reminder that while Santa may exist, God doesn't.
What happened to SantaCon is what happened to so many things. SantaCon was never a business. It was never a piece of IP. It was an idea. And the internet is what allowed SantaCon to spread and what changed SantaCon. Because once it spread and once anybody could do their own SantaCon and once different types of people could find out about SantaCon and come to SantaCon, its character, as you said, the law of averages, it changed to become, I think, a reflection of the population rather than the individuals who created it in the first place. And inevitably, that nightclub that was cool stops becoming cool when everybody goes there. And SantaCon was always about this shock and this newness and this confusion. But once you've seen SantaCon before, and certainly once you've seen it every year, that goes away. And
you roll your eyes.
You roll your eyes. And so no longer is it surprising. Instead, it kind of just became an excuse for people to go out and party.
Yes, that is Seth Porges, and you've tuned into another episode of Comedy History 101, where we school you in comedy. I am Harmon, hello, and Seth is the director of the new documentary SantaCon, which will be premiering Thursday, November 13th at DocNYC. And we do a deep dive into the origin story of what started out as a small San Francisco art collective event that was put on by the same group that started Burning Man and inspired Project Mayhem in the movie book Fight Club, and how it turned on its head to become one of NYC's most hated events, Bromageddon, as they say. And you might know Seth's previous work from the HBO Max documentary Class Action Park, which is about the most dangerous amusement park in America during the 1980s, which features comedy icon Chris Gethard and John Hodgman. But before we jump into the episode, a few quick plugs. On Friday, November 14th, 9 p.m. at the Under St. Mark's Theater, I'll be presenting my show Tale, NYC's finest storytelling. It's part of the Gotham Storytelling Festival. And on Saturday, November 15th, also at Under St. Mark's Theater, I wrote a play. It's called The Roast of Graham Parsons, a dark musical comedy featuring the music of Graham Parsons, the godfather of alt-rock country. The premise is, in 1973, Graham and his tour manager, Phil, made a pact. Whoever died first, the other would cremate their body in Joshua Tree. Graham died first. Phil stole his body. It didn't work out as planned. And on Thursday, November 20th, at Young Ethel's in Park Slope, I'll be presenting my show, That 80s Improv Challenge. Yes, 3 improv teams compete by creating scenes based on video clips from the 1980s. And you can find out all about my show dates on my site, harmonleon.com, or on the social medias at harmonleon. Furthermore, show Comedy History 101 a little love. Give us some likes, some stars, no less than 5 on iTunes, Spotify, or drop a comment and share an episode with a friend. Every little bit helps. And you can check out our site, comedyhistory101.com, or find us on Instagram at comedyhist101. And now, without further ado...
You're stupid. Everybody's so stupid.
I'm trying to use the phone!
Excuse me! Comedy History 101.
Even the people who started SantaCon are now sick of it.
There was a time when the goal wasn't to be famous and it wasn't to be rich. It was just to have fun with your fucking life.
Hey, all right, now I have the right microphone in the thing. Thank you for your patience. Game on.
Are you based here in New York?
I'm in New York, yeah.
Very nice, very nice. I also sojourned this weekend to Class Action Park, so I figure you're a New Jersey guy.
Everybody thinks I'm a New Jersey guy. I've never lived in New Jersey a day in my life. Are we going right now, or doing the thing where you just jump into it?
It's all cinema. We're just always going.
All right, we're doing it.
Been going. Yeah,
all
yeah.
Right, good.
So first or second, congratulations on the film. When did SantaCon, aka the most hated night in New York City, when did that first come on your radar?
I mean, SantaCon came onto my radar the way it came onto so many New Yorkers' radar. You made the mistake of going outside on that day, and suddenly you see, wait, okay, I see Santa Claus. Wait, now I see 20 Santa Claus. Now I see 2,000 Santa Claus. You suddenly start asking yourself, like, what's going on here? And then the fists come out, and then the vomit comes, and then the handcuffs come. And I think, like everybody who had ever bumped into Santa Claus, I'd never, gone full Santa Claus myself, but anybody who had bumped into it has sort of the same experience, which is, ew, gross, get me away from this thing. It's awful. And so when I kind of started digging and found out there was more to the story, I was instantly intrigued.
Yeah, and so how would you describe that 180-degree starting point of SantaCon?
Yeah, I mean, that's what really drew me in. This whole thing began in an offhand conversation I had with an old friend of mine named Scott Beal, and he started telling me about...
He's a friend of mine as well.
There you go, a friend of ours named Scott Beal.
Yes.
And I bumped into him at Tom and Jerry Bar on Elizabeth Street, and Scott started telling me about how he and his friends had been at SantaCon from the beginning, and how what it is now is so different from what it was. And I was like, wait, you mean it was more than this? There's something else going on here? And then he started telling me about how they had also started Burning Man and inspired Fight Club's Project Mayhem. And I'm like, wait, what's going on here? And then he just says the thing that really blows my mind, which is that he had personally video recorded many of the early years of SantaCon. And we've been old friends, and so we just offered to show me the footage. And when I saw the footage, I instantly knew, wait, I think there's a movie in here. But even then, I was like, wait, you can't make a movie about SantaCon. It's too stupid. Like, it's just too stupid a topic to make a movie about. But the more I kept thinking about it, and this dissonance, this disconnect between what I thought of SantaCon and what I was learning about SantaCon, the more I thought it was a bigger story than I had previously imagined.
And how would you describe, for those not in the know, also just thinking it's, Bromageddon in New York, how would you describe that early days of SantaCon and their intents of what they were trying to accomplish?
Yeah, I think the beauty of the early SantaCons, which were all caught on beautiful Hi8 and VHS and, scanline filled camcorder footage by folks such as Scott. The beauty of it isn't so much that the Santas are acting that different, it's that everybody around them is acting different. The Santas were always a little belligerent.
Don't stop till you're inside.
Always probably drinking a little too much, always being a little bit, naughty. But the people around them, they had not yet been conditioned to recognize that this was an awful thing. And because of that, they allowed themselves these moments of awe and wonder and joy in encountering the Santas. And I think any of the Santas that have a different idea about what is the meaning of this, what's the purpose of this, never really had an explicit manifesto. It was sort of this blank slate, this tabula rasa, that people could fill in their own meanings with. And because nobody knew what it was, you would see these meanings fill in on the faces of the people around them. And so that to me is the real beauty and the real joy of the old footage of SantaCon, is seeing people around them see something they have never seen before and trying to make sense of it. And that, I think, if you were to ask folks like Scott, folks like John Law, who were involved with the early SantaCons, I think they would say that it's that moment of like shock and awe that jumps people out of their routine, of their sense of normalcy, of their sense of how the world operates, that creates this opportunity for transcendence or beauty or joy or art or horror or terror or anything else in between.
Yeah, so maybe tell us back before SantaCon, you mentioned John Law, who's kind of like arty Johnny Knoxville type, in a way, and, because he was always like climbing things and jumping off things. And what other projects were they doing before SantaCon that way kind of connect the dots?
Yeah, I think the Cacophony Society, which is the group that started SantaCon, it also started Burning Man and countless other crazy things that never had the cultural penetration. Many of them were one-offs or, like Navajo Sandar, pieces of ephemeral media that were created and then disappeared into the ether. I think there's a real argument to be made that the Cacophony Society was kind of this Rosetta Stone for the modern underground.
In 1986, some Bay Area eccentrics banded together to form the San Francisco Cacophony Society. This society has no rules, no regulations. Its main goal is to make life more interesting by sharing unusual experiences. With over 150 members, the group has put together rather bizarre events and field trips that give a special twist to the phrase, "get a life."
So many of the ideas that they sort of pioneered permeated the culture in ways both obvious and not obvious. I mean, obvious, like, yes, they literally inspired Fight Club and Project Mayhem. They literally created Burning Man.
Just back up on that fact, because that's a big fact.
It's a big thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And how was Chuck, I always pronounce his name incorrectly, Polachuk.
Just call him Chuck.
Involved
Just
with
Chuck.
it. Yeah. Author of Fight Club for listeners and viewers.
So Chuck, who's in our movie, was a member of the Portland Cacophony Society, and he was at the very first Portland SantaCon. And you can see him in our footage, taking notes and interviewing people, which aroused the suspicion.
They thought he was like an undercover cop or something.
They thought he was an undercover cop. They thought he was like, like faking being a Santa and was actually police. And that's because that year in Portland, the Portland police were terrified and paranoid of the Santas. They were tapping their phones, supposedly infiltrating them. They met the Santas at a shopping mall with a phalanx of cops in full riot gear, ready to basically beat up Santa. And so there was this real sense of like paranoia and terror permeating the Santas because they didn't know something horrible was going to happen. And here's Chuck Palahniuk just taking notes and interviewing people. And of course the Santas are going to be suspicious. And of course they're going to give him the third degree. And of course Scott Beale is going to capture that moment on tape. But, Chuck talks about how Project Mayhem was inspired by Fight Club. Inspired by Cacophony Society. Talks about in our film, and sort of the weird, haphazard, chaotic structure, the structural anarchy, if you will, that Cacophony Society allowed for people to do kind of crazy, off-the-wall things that sort of push the limits of normalcy and push the limits of, things that had no reason to exist other than the fact that they existed.
When Tyler invented Project Mayhem, Tyler said the goal of Project Mayhem had nothing to do with other people. Tyler didn't care if other people got hurt or not. The goal was to teach each man in the project that he had the power to control history. We, each of us, can take control of the world.
Yeah, so, and again, like, they were handing out flyers like, beware of Santas to like merchants and stores. And again, it's like parallels modern day Portland, where it's like, oh, we gotta send out the National Guard, where in your film you see police lined up in full riot gear ready to bash Santa heads.
Yeah, I mean the bulk of our film takes place over these 4 years, 95 to 98, in 4 different cities, as the original Santas spread this idea like the Johnny Appleseeds of chaos and bedlam, taking it from city to city. And I think one of the most remarkable things when you look at the old footage is how different cities responded to Santa, right? And so San Francisco, it's kind of all over the place, and nobody had ever seen this before. That's where it begins. And eventually the police are like, you guys are going too far. They go to Portland, and the moment they arrive at the airport in Portland, the police are waiting for them. And from the minute they get there, you get the sense that Portland cannot handle the idea that 100 people would be dressed like Santa Claus. It's threatening to them.
Was that it at the beginning? Like, how big was the group at the beginning? Like roughly about 80?
Yeah, it was probably about 100 Santas in each of these early cities. It gets a little bit bigger each year as it kind of goes on. And then they go to LA, and nobody cares in LA because you walk down Hollywood Boulevard and there's 20 guys dressed like Spider-Man already. People assume it's a film shoot. Like, it's hard to shock people in LA. It's hard to get anybody's attention. It's hard to make any sort of impact. And then they go to New York, and in New York, it all kind of comes together into this like prototype version of what New York SantaCon, which is of course the biggest and most infamous of them, would become. But back then, you know, people had not yet been jaded to the idea of SantaCon. They weren't yet turned off by it. And so it's allowed to spread through the streets without, you know, arousing the hatred and ire that it would arouse in later years.
You're stupid. Everybody's so stupid.
That's what John Law said in your film, that, you know, it just made people happy. And you
It just made
see in
people
your
happy.
film that cops were actually laughing and joking with the Santas, which you wouldn't get in 2025.
And you didn't get in Portland just a couple of years before. In Portland, the police tell them, if you step foot across this border of this shopping mall, we are going to move in and we will arrest you and we will possibly beat you up, right? That is what the Portland police tell them, and it's on camera. In San Francisco, cop says one more misstep and we're moving in. In New York, the cops are just making jokes, and one of the cops says, hey, we're not going to get a call that a bunch of Santas are robbing a train or anything, right? And just says like, Merry Christmas, and walks off. And that's even when the Santas are doing legitimately transgressive and illegal things in New York in a way they're not in these other cities. I mean, the New York sequence ends with the Santas literally as Santa in the shadow of the Twin Towers climbing the Brooklyn Bridge.
Yeah,
Something
you can't do that anymore.
You couldn't do it then. That was, that was something that was never a legal, socially acceptable act. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I guess, do you think like the big turning point, because this was like, you mentioned like Burning Man and these other type of events that popped up, that SantaCon being like this sort of disruptor art event was such a thing of its era, which is the cusp of the dawn of the internet, where no one had cell phones, and it's just like you as the general public would just be shocked by it, where once it became an internet thing, you know, laws of averages is just going to be diluted.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple things there you're suggesting that I think are really interesting. One is that this was an event like anything in the 90s that was not made with the intention of being video recorded and spread out on social media. Now, ironically, it was video recorded by these people.
Scott Beale.
By Scott Beale, in this sort of mad, you know, foresight, if you will, where he filmed all this, and a lot of that footage was just sitting on his hard drive for 30 years, right? And so I kind of got, I think, the best of both worlds. These activities that people were engaging in without the presumption of being recorded and put on social media, they weren't performing in the same way, yet it actually was recorded. And that, to me, allowed us to capture this moment right before, as you said, the internet would change everything. And SantaCon, what happened to SantaCon is what happened to so many things. SantaCon was never a business. It was never a piece of IP. It was an idea. And the internet is what allowed SantaCon to spread and what changed SantaCon. Because once it spread and once anybody could do their own SantaCon and once different types of people could find out about SantaCon and come to SantaCon, its character, as you said, the law of averages, it changed to become, I think, a reflection of the population rather than the individuals who created it in the first place. And inevitably, that nightclub that was cool stops becoming cool when everybody goes there. And SantaCon was always about this shock and this newness and this confusion. But once you've seen SantaCon before, and certainly once you've seen it every year, that goes away. And
you roll your eyes.
You roll your eyes. And so no longer is it surprising. Instead, it kind of just became an excuse for people to go out and party.
It's not a magical occasion. It's a terrifying combination of binge drinking, public urination, and trauma to small children that decades of therapy will never manage to reverse. Here is how bad it is. Last year, there were 14 people arrested and 4 officers injured during SantaCon in Hoboken, New Jersey alone. Just think about that. Arrested doing SantaCon in Hoboken, New Jersey. That might be literally the saddest sentence in existence. It is way worse than for sale baby shoes never worn, because at least that baby was just dead and not arrested in a Santa outfit in, I repeat, Hoboken, New Jersey.
But also just another first, pretty much maybe earlier flash mobs, but one of the original flash mob type events.
Yeah, I mean, the term flash mob didn't exist yet, but Cacophony Society was all over sort of these proto flash mobs. They had a number of events that involved a lot of people often dressed alike, dressed in theme or wearing costumes, showing up in places they wouldn't be expected to be, and then kind of creating this either panic or joy within the audience. So yeah, I think there's a real argument to be made that a Cacophony Society invented what would become the flash mob.
And what's your favorite piece of footage or insight from your film that you learned from, again, cast of characters, primarily John Law sort of leading the charge?
Yeah, I think watching this footage, there's so many moments that I'm like, I cannot believe these idiots were filming this. I cannot believe they held on to this footage. I cannot believe they gave me this footage. 1998 was the very first year it was in New York, and the Santas are just walking down Fifth Avenue and they bump into Michael Moore. And Michael Moore, like all of us, has no idea what the Santas are. And so it's clear that he thinks they're protesting consumerism and Christmas or something like that. And so they throw a Santa hat on him, start chanting, one of us, like in Todd Browning's Freaks. And then he just starts improvising these sort of twisted anti-corporate Christmas carols with the Santas. And it's all caught on camera from 2 different cameras because these idiots were filming everything.
Yeah, but in a way, it does align with Michael Moore and anti-consumerism and all that. I used to be a journalist for Vice, and I actually did do a story where I was in, I think, Coyote Uglies on SantaCon, and I had John Law on my cell phone and describing him the scene of what was going on and interviewing him while, he was in San Francisco, I'm in New York, all that. But I think he mentioned that, it was sort of as he says in your film, when he found out Santa Claus was a hoax and disillusioned by that, and also just, the consumerism of Christmas time.
Yeah, I think John gave us a real Christmas movie arc to this story. He is this like Grinch, like Scrooge like character who, for his reasons, grew up hating Christmas and hating Santa Claus because when he was a kid, he learned Santa Claus was a lie and he felt lied to. And so, this really feels like a Christmas movie where through the power of collaboration and community and creativity, these guys are able to rebuild, a new Christmas, a new idea of SantaCon into something that works for them, and eventually kind of learn to love Christmas again, which is what all of those movies are about.
Yeah, and then the first one in San Francisco, which you have captured beautifully on film, is Santa actually hung himself in Union Square, which is the epicenter of San Francisco, of shopping.
Yeah. John Law, with a hidden harness, gets hung on like a light pole in the middle of Market Street by Union Square in San Francisco, while hundreds of tourists and shoppers are around and have no idea what is going on. And that's one of those moments where it's like, I'm not sure what the statute of limitations is for this. John could have easily been like, no, that wasn't me. It's some other guy in a Santa costume. But these guys are just copping to it, and more power to them for it, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Because again, that's another thing with trying to arrest the Santas, which, a couple got arrested in that first one, is like everyone's dressed as Santa.
It's I am Spartacus is what it is.
Yeah,
it's like
exactly.
which Santa did it. And they ended up in that first year in San Francisco arresting the wrong Santa. They were looking for Chris Radcliffe, who had stolen a velvet rope from Planet Hollywood, swung it around like a giant velvet phallus around town, went to a department store called the Emporium, where the Emporium security officers believed he had stolen it from them. And when he refused, they handed it over to him saying, no, I stole it from somewhere else, not from you. That's when the police started to move in. And they were looking for the Santa who had stolen the velvet rope, the bad Santa, Chris Radcliffe. And they ended up arresting the wrong Santas, who were released soon after, because really hard to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that you got the right Santa in those scenarios.
Yeah, and just interesting is that John Law he was, by 1998, was done with it and tapped out of SantaCon, much in the way that, you mentioned he's one of the creators of Burning Man and tapped out of that early. And, then both of those kind of manifested into whatever they both became.
Yeah,
which wasn't opposite of the original intents of each.
Yeah, and I think that's something that was constantly in my mind while making this film, and I think is in some ways what the movie ends up being about, is how these ideas that start small, that you create as one thing, once the world gets a hold of them, they can become something else. And how do you respond to that? And I think what makes John such an incredible character, an incredible interview subject, is that he chooses not to be angry about it. He chooses not to be the guy who screams, "Hey kids, get off my lawn.
Yeah.
This thing isn't for me anymore."
Gran Torino on it.
Yeah. Yeah. He chooses rather to say, like, all right, it's not for me anymore, but that's fine. People are having fun with it. It doesn't have to be for me anymore. And I think there's something really beautiful about that point of view and way of seeing the world.
Yeah, and you have that great footage at the end where he's at the most recent up to that point, SantaCon, and just everyone was thrilled to meet him, and he was just loathing it all.
Well, yeah. So the movie, at the end of the movie, we take John and Rob Schmidt. Rob Schmidt's John's friend, and the Cacophony member who actually came up with the idea for SantaCon. We take both of them back to New York SantaCon for the first time in several decades. And to me, it's like Frankenstein. It's Dr. Frankenstein confronting his monster. These guys are forced to come face to face with this thing they've created and how it's changed from whatever they imagined it could be. And at the beginning, John in particular is clearly very nervous and suspicious about reconnecting with the SantaCon of his youth. But as the day goes on, I think he's able to you see it happen in real time as he sort of sheds the snobbiness about it and is like, you know what? Who cares if kids are being a little stupid? Who cares if they're throwing up a little? They're having fun. And if it kind of serves as a gateway creativity drug for them to eventually do something actually interesting, that's all the better.
Talked to John before, and that seems like the good approach. It's not for me. It's not for many New Yorkers, but these kids are having fun. They're just being drunk and stupid.
And there's real value in fun, and I think that's a lot of what Cacophony was all about, is just on its own with nothing else to it. Having a fun life is a noble pursuit. Having fun is a noble pursuit, especially having fun with other people, especially having fun in moments of collaboration and creativity. To some degree, that's what life is all about. And the world we live in now, the surface values that are thrown out there are very different from that. And I think when people look back at what Cacophony did, I hope what they come away from is the feeling that fun unto itself is a noble goal unto it, with nothing else at it, just on its own.
And as a storyteller, how would you link the two stories, SantaCon and Class Action Park, in your overall storytelling ethos?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly.
First of all, I just watched Class Action Park yesterday, prepping the interview, and I was like, oh, how did this not be on my radar? Because, like, holy shit.
The story of Action Park is a true crime story. As you entered the park, you saw this thing, and you're like, this is real.
The engineering behind this, if there was any engineering, was just nuts.
Build it higher, make it faster. People control the action.
Combine that with liquor and anything goes.
There were no rules. For a lot of kids, that was heaven.
And if you couldn't swim well, yikes.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I can't believe the footprint Class Action Park has had and how many people it seemed to have spoken to. I mean, like, truly can't believe it. It's a dream to me. It's wild. And I think SantaCon, I view it in many ways as a spiritual sequel to Class Action Park. I think tonally, stylistically, and thematically, there's just a lot in common with these two movies. And I think both are about the allure of chaos to very different ends, and how we as people are drawn to pushing the limits of what is societally acceptable and what we're allowed to do. And in Class Action Park, it's more about of an era, yeah. And taking you back to eras in which envelope pushing sort of manifests in different ways than it does today, and was allowed in different ways it does today. And that's not to say it's always good. I think Class Action Park is about the nuance that sometimes this wasn't good and people got hurt, people died. SantaCon, I think it's all about the beauty of pushing the limits of what society allows in a way that sparks joy and creativity and imagination. And those are all things I think we should all aspire to have more of in our lives.
Yeah, and just a footnote, like a class action part reminded me of like Wet Hot American Summer meets like someone having an unsanctioned zoo with wild animals.
Well, that's a good idea. I mean, if you want to do this, I mean, are any zoos sanctioned? Like, who sanctions zoos? Yeah,
well, just like the Tiger King type zoos, those kind of zoos where they just kind of pop up on the roadside and they have like a few tigers.
I mean, move the floor to get a tiger and the rest is profit, I suppose, right? So.
Yeah. Just one last question about Class Action Park. You hooked up with also just because it's Comedy History 101, you also had Chris Gethard, who grew up around there, big, comic, and John Hodgman as well. How did you hook up with them for the project?
Yeah. I mean, they were both such important voices in making Class Action Park what it was. Chris had been in the short I had been involved with prior to the feature about Action Park, and I knew he had a lot to say about the topic and just a unique ability to say it in a way that was engaging and absolutely hilarious and insightful at the same time. I mean, nobody tells stories like Chris Gethard does. Nobody tells jokes like Chris Gethard does. And nobody pulls these things from thin air in the middle of an interview like Chris Gethard does. I mean, truly one of the greatest sit-down interview subjects a documentary filmmaker could ever ask for. John Hodgman, I got word that he had been to Action Park before, and that was when we were thinking like, hey, do we need a narrator for this movie? And instantly, when I read that John Hodgman had been to Action Park, I was like, well, he's the absolute perfect person for this, in the sense that he is both, incredibly witty, incredibly funny, but also comes off as authoritative, has the ability to speak about things with intelligence and dryness and humor, and had just like the absolute backbone voice for narrating the film that I was looking for.
Yeah, I mean, what was the stat? On any given weekend, there'd be 100 injuries?
On one ride, on just the Alpine slide alone. That ride was mutilating triple-digit people every single Saturday afternoon at Action Park, which is an absolutely insane thing to think about.
I'm trying to use the phone!
And then just lastly, what do you think SantaCon's place is in comedy history, being that's the name of this podcast?
Yeah, I mean, every year, like clockwork, as December comes onto our calendars, it's a sure thing that at least some of the late night comics will make some SantaCon jokes. And we feature, a handful of them in our film. Jimmy Fallon calls it The Nightmare Before Christmas, of course. Colin Jost says, I believe it's something like, it's proof that while Santa may exist, God does not. It is the absolute easiest and best thing to make fun of, for sure. And if you are a New York-based comic and you don't have a SantaCon joke or two in your arsenal, what have you been doing here, man?
And lastly, where can people see the documentary?
Yeah, we're premiering it November 13th, DocNYC Film Festival. We're playing in competition. Very, very excited. And then hopefully we'll be able to announce further, screening distribution plans soon after that.
Steph, so great to talk to you. And I really enjoyed the documentary, and good luck with all the screenings.
Yeah, look, first thing, jump on it. What did you think? Like, you're one of the very few people who's actually seen this movie, so what did you think?
I'm from San Francisco originally, and it first of all, there's many points that just connected with me. Not disconnected, connected with me. First, it just brought me back to the crazy arty scene that could only come out of San Francisco, which kind of just made me nostalgic. Second, I live in New York now, so brought me to knowing how New Yorkers react and how I react when I see it in New York. Third, I've talked to John before, about this, and so I got to get to know him and have a one-on-one. Third, just overall, I enjoyed the arc of the story of, starting at current day, then bring it back and the historical content of it. Then, the disclose at the end where you bring John to current day, SantaCon. So I enjoyed all that journey, and knowing Scott Beale, I've seen some of that footage in the past. So, tie all that up in a nice bow, and I really enjoyed it.
So you're like right in the Venn diagram center for this thing, it sounds like.
Yeah, I'm your target audience.
All right, thanks. Okay, good. My base. All right. Harmon, what a treat. This has been a lot of fun. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you very much. That wraps up today's episode on the history of SantaCon, the most hated event in NYC. And if you're in New York City, you can check out the screening on Thursday, November 13th, as part of DocNYC. Also, the quick plugs. Friday, November 14th, 9 p.m. at Under St. Mark's Theater, Tale, NYC's finest storytelling. And on November 15th, also at Under St. Mark's Theater, The Roast of Graham Parsons. Moving to November 20th, 7 p.m. at Young Ethel's in Park Slope, That 80s Improv Challenge. And you can find out all about my show dates on my site, harmonleon.com, or on the social medias at harmonleon. Also, show Comedy History 101 A Little Love. No less than 5 stars on iTunes, Spotify. Drop a comment. Share an episode with a friend. Every little bit helps. And we love bringing you such great episodes, such as today's on the history of SantaCon. And until next time, bye-bye.
You're stupid. Everybody's so stupid.
I'm trying to use the phone! Excuse me! Comedy History 101.